there, and welcome to my channel. I'm your host, Dancing Johari. We're at the end of the Mermaid series, and well, what else is there to say, really? It's time to go to the workstation! Okay, so this is a gift for Lady Dynamite Creates, and as you can see, this doll is parts. We have a Vandala de Bloom's head, and a ghost body that I got for my daughter, my very first custom. I ended up repainting the face and giving her a whole new body because her arms were broken. I fixed the arms, and now we need to insert a hole to put in an armature that's in line with the spine. So let's drill. Now that doesn't quite fit, so now we got to make it a little bit wider with a bit. So we're gonna use a sanding bit. There we go. That's better. Taking hot glue, glue the connector into place. Once it's cool, use your Jeton armature pliers to connect your armature if you have one. If not, you can use wire. Now I'm going to take epoxy sculpt, and we're going to seal that connector into place so it can't come out. Sorry about the bad camera angle on this. Next, take little balls of aluminum foil and fill in the holes of where the legs were. Then take a little more epoxy sculpt, a thin layer, and put it over that to keep it in place. Put aside to cure. Now it's time to, while that cures, let's get rid of the hair and prep the head. So I'm going to take a very sharp pair of scissors, cut the hair short, and then use my pliers to remove the plugs. So much fun removing this. Takes a little while, but honestly, that one didn't take very long. Using 100% acetone or nail polish remover, you remove the factory paint. I use makeup pads, and then I follow it up with Q-tips for the creases. Get in there. Much better. Now, what color hair should I use? Smoke, that looks okay, but we did that. That looks better. Ooh. Okay, I know it's very Ariel-ish for the mermaid I'm planning, but this red, ginger, and turquoise just goes together so well. There we go. I just go ahead and make one row, and then I start filling it in parts. I do the back first, I do the sides, I get all the way up to the part and fill in the part. Here I've already done it all, and I've already marked off the part, so let's glue it in place. I know it looks sparse in some places, but once I do the boil wash, you're not going to notice. Use a brush to make sure all the plugs are coated. Now, taking a mermaid fin pattern I've already made up, I go ahead, along with this tail pattern I've made up for my siren tail, I go ahead and take out some interfacing, some wire, pen, and some fabric. First, I trace the pattern onto the interfacing, make sure it's right, and as symmetrical as possible, and then I cut it out. Be very careful in the middle area if you're doing anything other than like a beta tail. It's a little tricky sometimes to get up in there without cutting through everything. There we go. That looks great. Now I'm going to use this fabric, so let's use this to kind of measure off how much we need. Then turning it wrong side up, I take off the first piece of paper and stick it down, the interfacing down onto it. I'm using Easy Steam too. This gives it a little bit of stiffness, but at the same time, it's still very floppy. And it makes it a nice permanent seal once you've hit it with an iron. Next, I take off the paper for the other side, put down a wire, and carefully put this down on the other side. Now you see why I said wrong side out. Haha. It's so that you don't accidentally put the wrong side out. The right side on the inside of your fin or fluke. be careful cutting around the wire. It can get a little tricky. I'm still trying to think of a better way to do this part. But so far, this is just the best way. There we go. Next, let's attach it to the end of the armature. So taking the wire, I twist it carefully around, trying to make sure that everything goes completely symmetrical when I pull it in this time. Then I trim off the excess. Now, I know it swivels still, but that'll get fixed after we finish your tail. So let's cut out the fabric for the tail ahead. Cut it a little on the biggish side. I cut it a little bit form-fitting because this fabric is very stretchy, but if your fabric isn't stretchy, you might want to cut it a little big. I love this stuff. It's made of spandex, it stretches, it's great stuff. Okay, now that that's cut, let's put away the extra supplies and get out batting. Quilt batting. I use the thin stuff for this particular kind of doll because, well, they're small. Oh, first, let's seal that fin. Now it's time for batting. Okay, I'm going to cut some strips of batting. I think I used 4. And then I just wrap it around the base of the armature and all the way down. And I basically build up the shape that I'm looking for. This basically creates the muscle or meat of the tail. The armature is great for flexibility and everything, but you gotta have something else in there to fill it up. I use hot glue to secure it down. You can also just sew your tail ahead, slip it on, put on the fluke, and then stuff it like Delightful did in her Mermaid video. But this is the way I like to do it. It's like KP Creations Half Art doll. It's a little bit easier. Yes, you can control the shape that you're going for. Now I taking some pins, pin on your fabric. And then using a ladder stitch, sew the sides shut one side at a time. Do leave a small hole at the base next to the fluke. The reason being, we're going to put some stuffing in that to go at the fluke base, just to fill out the end of the tail. And the reason I use a ladder stitch here is because it leaves a nice clean seam. Okay, and then when you get to the bottom part, on top of leaving a little bit of a hole, you can make a little space and then do a modified ladder stitch to hide the stitching on the fluke. This way it brings down the raw edge of the fabric and hides it, and at the same time makes it look really nice and like it's really a mermaid tail. Kind of a cool way to hide your stitches, if you like that. If you like to hide your stitches, that is. I prefer to hide my stitches as much as I can. Repeat on the other side to close up the other seam, but as I said, leave a hole somewhere at the bottom of the fluke on at least one side. Then using polyfill stuffing or whatever fluff you've got, your leftover fluff from yarn wefts also works. Fill up the bottom of the tail a little bit till you're satisfied with it, just so you don't feel the bony part of the armature at the very, very bottom. It also makes it look more fish-like. Then sew that little hole shut once you're satisfied. And then because I also partially left a small hole open on the fluke, I also had to seal that shut too. Next, taking hot glue, glue down all around at the top of the tail, down onto the plastic to hide the transition. Then taking rectangles of fabric, pin them in, take one, fold it in half, gather it up, or you could just take a rectangle of fabric without folding it. I preferred to fold this one just because it looked a little bit more solid. Once you have it pinned in place, go ahead and sew it to the top part of the tail. So when you glue it down, leave a little bit at the top where it's not completely glued down so you can sew. Then taking more rectangles, I go ahead and shape them into the fins I want, and just taking single sheets this time, I go ahead and gather them up and then sew them onto the tail. This is a dorsal fin, so it's going to go on the back. The other two will go on the seams on the sides. You can add as many or as little fins as you want. You don't have to do this part if you don't want to. It's just an extra step I like to do. Just makes it look more fishy, and let's face it, how many mermaids actually have like 0 extra fins? How many fish do you see that have only one fin being the fluke? They need something to stir around with, and while she has arms, this kind of makes it look prettier. Shows that she has a little bit more to her than just, just a powerful fluke. Now it's time to address the next problem. Let's mask off the head, mask off the tail, and rejoin them. Since her head is slightly green and her body is white and her hands are clear, we're going to use some acrylic Jacquard Lumier Paint, which is good for plastic as well as for fabric. And I'm going to take 2 different colors. I'm going to take Pearlescent Turquoise. Okay, it comes out mint green. I found that out the hard way on another doll. And I was going for turquoise. Well, in this case, I figured that the light green would complement the turquoise really well. So I mixed it up with a little bit of pearl white and put it all over the doll with a makeup sponge. Then I put 2 coats of Mr. Super Clear and taking my watercolor pencils after that was dry. And yes, it dried outside. I don't bring that stuff into the house. Use a respirator mask also when you use Mr. Super Clear. It's really toxic stuff. You do not want to get that in your lungs. Anyway, so I used, after I had let her dry it completely outside for half an hour, I brought her in and started sketching in her features. We started with the shape of the eyes, the waterline, the shape of the irises, the eyeliner line, and I decided this time to give her brown eyes. Just seemed right. I've done a lot of different colored eyes this season, mostly pastels and odd things that you might see on fish in the ocean, but this time I decided I was going to go with brown. It just looked good. And she looked really sweet when I was done. I also took a black pencil to darken up the nostrils, and then taking a brush and some eyeshadow in a ginger or light copper color to complement her hair, I started the shape of the eyebrows and then refined them with my kneaded eraser. And just kept playing with it until I was happy with the general shape. Next, taking more eyeshadow in a different color. I think I used a light peach for her lips. Or a light pink, one of the two. I go ahead and blush her lips, and then taking other colors, I blush her cheeks, her nose, and the top of her cheeks. So I blushed the sides of her cheeks, one color, and then the tops of her cheeks with another. Along with her nose. It's a technique I saw Acetone use, and honestly, I really love how it just brings more character. Next, I took some eyeshadow and gave her eyeshadow just above her eyes. Oops, some of it got on the iris. Let's cover that up. Still kind of shows through a little bit, but that's okay. Then I added highlights with my white watercolor pencil, and just played with it until I was happy. I added a little bit of a shadowy effect under her eyes. And let's give her a hairline that matches. Okay, this is the closest pencil I had, But I did fine tune it later with Lumiere acrylic paints in pearl white and I believe brassy copper. It just, yeah, it was a copper paint. It just went with her hair and it made it blend a lot easier. Just keep building up the colors until you're happy with it. Went ahead and traced in the pupils. Went over her hairline again. This is after another coat of Mr. Super Clear, by the way. And then I started using a fine tipped watercolor pencil to finish filling in the eyebrows and give her little individual hairs. Then I gave it highlights. Whiten the eyes. A lot of this stuff is very repetitive, I know, but it's so satisfying once it's all done. I love face-ups. It takes me about 2, sometimes 3 hours. Sometimes it takes me overnight, depending on the weather. Taking a white watercolor pencil, I go ahead and add some highlights to the creases of her eyes. And then just add more colors. When you start having trouble building up colors, like I am here, it's time for another coat of Mr. Super Clear. Then since I was going to take her outside and spray her anyway, I added some more paint to the tops of her shoulders with her arms folded down to get the spots I missed. After another coat of Mr. Super Clear, it's time for the eyelashes. Sorry for the different camera angle. I think the other camera angle was better, to be honest. I'll remember that for next one. More blush to the lips. Going over those eyelashes again. And now I'm starting to have trouble building up any color at all on these eyes. And I want to put in some details. So maybe it's time to rethink that. But let's finish what I'm going to do with the watercolor pencils first. At least for now. Added in some highlights. Then I gave her another dose of Mr. Super Clear, coat of Mr. Super Clear. When she's dry, I bring her back in, and it's time for gouache. Now I know you can't see it, but I'm adding in different shades of brown to add in the details to her eyes. The eyes themselves are fine. They just need different colorations to bring out the fact that those are eyes. So using different shades of brown, I add a highlight around her pupil and highlights to her eyes as well as shadows. Then I darken up that eyeliner and her pupil. And then I do the other side. Now I got a little heavy-handed with the highlight around the pupil on this side. So let's try again. I might add a little bit more color to that to kind of hide that little mistake. On the next coat, I'll finish fixing that. I might darken up her pupil. Let that dry because it's a little watery. I had to add a little bit of water to my gouache this time. There we go. Now we're going to add in that highlight again. I covered up the old one. So there we go. Now that looks good. Trying the highlight one more time. Because the last one didn't show it, but kind of blended in. There we go. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Now some eye shines. Brighten up parts of the white, not all of it, because we want some of it to be a little bit darker to give it some depth and definition. Then I add a little pink to the corners of her eyes. Just, again, we're trying to create dimension. Next, I do the eyeliner again, and I go over her eyelashes. It's just a combination of doing the watercolor pencil and the gouache. It just makes it look so nice. And it comes out really nice and delicate, too. The thing with eyelashes is you gotta do it on a little bit of a curve. You can't do it straight. Then, since I still have my stuff out, I went ahead and blushed the body. Once after 2 more coats of Mr. Super Clear, I go ahead and I coat her heads, arms, and torso with Dragonfly Glaze. It adds some extra sparkle and a little bit of a color shift to her skin. She won't need it for the tail by the time I'm done, but for right now, especially since that fabric has a color shift to it, but her head and her body definitely needs that color shift look, I think. Makes it kind of look like she just came out of the water, too. Then with plain Liquitex gloss varnish, I go over her eyes and lips. Okay, now that that's done, we still have scales to put on this tail. So taking a spare swatch of fabric and my Lumiere paints that are specially made for fabric. The black one is just for fabric. The other one's an acrylic. The gold is an acrylic. I go ahead and draw on her scales and then highlight them with the gold. So shiny. Highlight, highlight, highlight. I want to make sure these scales show up after all. And then taking the same colors, I go ahead and draw on the veins on her fluke. This was just a really good art day. I was feeling very, very playful. It was almost like drawing henna. I draw henna at the Beltane Fair here in New York, on Long Island, New York sometimes. I didn't this year because I was sick, but most years I'm there. And I love doing it. The people there and the vibe is so joyful. Anyway, so this is kind of like doing henna for that. I was just playing and having fun. Having fun with the different curves and the different thicknesses of the veins. Then I highlighted the veins with gold. It makes it look like it's got more veins than there really is, but it also gives it a nice color shift to the fluke. Just a little. Then taking some Lumiere Turquoise, I go around the edge. Just to hide the inside part of the fabric, but also to give it a little bit of a highlight and a gradient to the fluke. And then I also do it to the seams of the tail and to the base of the fins. So pretty! I'm in love with this tail. And there we go. I do the base of the fins with this particular color. Then to the edges of the fins, I give it a little bit of a black wash, watered down black, with the same fabric paint. Then add some dots in black and turquoise. Once it's all dry for 24 hours, I hit it with my crafting iron to set the paint permanently into the fabric. After a boil wash through her hair and a bit of a manicure with the same turquoise paint and a chance to dry, once she's dry, hair's dry, it's time for the eyelashes, and we're giving her 3D eyelashes. I used clusters of 3 from Arlene's or Ardene's from Sally's. Actually, I picked these one up in Target's, and I used some jewelry glue to attach them. Next, she needs a top, and it's a bit late at night, so I decided to go ahead and crochet her a little top. This was a fun process. It didn't take me very long. It only took me about 16 minutes really to make this little top. But it, on camera it looks like it takes forever. And I crocheted the little loops, the jump rings on the sides to the sides and to the top. One to each side, one to the top. So I can tie this, so I can put her top on. We're not going to make it a full wraparound top. We're just going to make it sure that her front is covered. And there we are. Now I just need to tie it on with some of the same colored thread. Then using some 3D resin, UV resin, I made some accessories and then to go on her throne and sculpted her throne. This was a combination of real shells, UV resin, EVA foam, and Crayola magic clay. And then using the same jewelry glue and paints, I go ahead and paint it, add the accessories. And then using epoxy sculpt and wire, I created her a coral crown and painted it to match the throne. Then, using some spare beads and some old pins that no longer were straight, I made her some earrings. And she's done. This is the Mermaid Queen. I did not give her a name because she's going to be a gift for Lady Dynamite Creates. And as of this video, she has already received it, and she has arrived safely along with her throne to her house. Thank goodness. She looks so regal. Now, here she is with her mermaid court and me. I hope you enjoyed the video. Honestly, I really did love how she came out. I will miss her, but she was totally intended all along as a gift for Lady Dynamite, and I hope she enjoys her. Please, thank you all for subscribing and for all your support. The next video will be our 100 subscriber celebration. For now, thank you so much. Please like, subscribe, and share. And thanks for watching. Bye.